Hello together, I'm Julian, co-founder of Biovox. Who am I and who's Biovox? Well, Biovox is a German startup company. We are pretty new on the market. We are creating bioplastics for especially demanding applications that have high regulatory burdens. So that's why I thought let's give a presentation about regulation, basically, because that's what I'm doing all the day. I'm responsible for the market, and this means sales, product planning, and of course the political framework that we are working in. We are especially providing materials for the healthcare sector, for the laboratory sector, and hygiene products, as well as some food-grade plastics, but less for the packaging sector, more for machine parts, for example antimicrobial machine parts and stuff like that. So this is the presentation, 11 fascinating reasons why customers like bioplastic regulation. And with bioplastic regulation I refer especially to the upcoming regulation in the framework of the Green Deal, the European Commission's Green Deal, and the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. They will affect how we work and which materials can be successful in the next years by really a great deal. So if we as a bioplastic community want to have success, we need to focus on a few certain things in order to be competitive and to be the preferred solution for future plastics. Let's dive into it and have fun with the presentation. So, now to the presentation, 11 fascinating reasons customers like bioplastic regulation. I already mentioned why I think I can speak about this topic. We are coming from making all these nice products out of bioplastics or developing towards it. And those are heavily regulated because mostly they are in the healthcare sector. So European regulation is nothing new for us. And yeah, I try to share some of the experience that we have there. If you have a look at an example product, for example, these bottles, if you are about to make them more sustainable, what biopolymer would you use as a base or as the foundation of your bioplastics? Well, they have to be tight, they have to be sealed, they have to have a nice soft touch. If they are falling down, they shouldn't break at all. So today they are made out of polyethylene or polypropylene, such products, and PBS would be a nice solution from the bioplastics, new bioplastic materials. But there is a huge downside. We have compared another product for a customer. He's making it out of ABS today and thinks about going to recycled ABS, and also wanted to see how bioplastics could behave in this term. We used PLA, or are planning with PLA as a substitute, and as we see, of course with PLA you can get a lot better than ABS, but if you are comparing with recycled ABS, then you have to go to recycled PLA in order to maintain a certain reduction in carbon emissions. And this shows how important it is to get very good carbon footprints, because certain reasons. Carbon footprint is relatively easy to measure. I'm not talking about the accuracy of that, but it's an easy to understand KPI, and because of that, and because of much of the regulation directs to carbon emissions, customers will ask about the carbon emission, about the carbon footprint. And if a bioplastic is not good there, it's hard to sell, and for a good reason. And that's taking me back to the PBS. If you are having a look at PBS, PBS has 50% bio-based material and seems, as far as the data that we have show, seems to have less efficient synthesis processes than PLA. So if the customer wants those bottles, it might be that the bioplastic solution is worse than the fossil solution from the carbon footprint point of view. And that's a difficulty. And we want to have a better insight in what makes bioplastic successful in the future. So what are the key factors that we as researchers, as producers of bioplastics, of biopolymers, need to achieve in order to be competitive against fossil plastics? I had a look at this complex field of information. You have regulation, you have the customer, you have certain properties of the material, you have different entities that influence the sustainability, you have different laws, and you have funding and whatnot. And to get some overview over such a complex amount of information, I used mapping as a methodology, and maps, they are consisting out of nodes. That's the colorful dots we are seeing here. And maps also have edges. And edges can be directed. So this node, this object influences this one. This one influences then the bigger blue one, and that, and this one gets back to the first one. So you have some circle of control here. What could this be? If this is the European Commission, they are basically deciding on which research and which topics get funding. The funding is directed, for example, to bioplastics projects, and those bioplastics, they can influence the carbon footprint. And as we saw before, they can do it in a beneficial way, or they can be less beneficial compared to fossil solutions. And then there is the big red dot, the customer, and the customer also has some goals to achieve. For example, he chooses materials partly based on their carbon footprint. So what is the perspective of our customer? What does he or she want? First, put the customer into the middle because it's the most important person in all of that game. The customers, they want certain technical properties. For example, a soft bottle that doesn't break when it falls down. And they want it at a certain price point, of course, because if the bioplastic costs 2 or 3 times the price that fossil plastic is costing, then it often gets pretty difficult to sell it. We talk about technical properties later. More important for us now are other factors that influence the customers, such as trends. The trend can be sustainability, because the society is moving towards more sustainability. It gets more focus, this topic, and more people want to buy sustainable products. That's a good trend. But the customer, of course, transforms this trend into requirements that he or she communicates to us, the bioplastic suppliers, the biopolymer suppliers. Also, process know-how influences the customer. If plastic needs to be manufactured in a way that the customer doesn't know how, then it makes it more difficult for the customer to accept it. I don't see that we have a problem there, so we leave it beside. And the third one is regulation. Regulation that affects the customer will affect the supply chain in front of the customer. And one of the key points, I already mentioned it, in regulation is carbon footprint. The second key point is recyclability, of course. And there are microplastics emissions that are part of regulation. And if you are talking about microplastics, microplastics can damage ecosystems. The customer doesn't want that, because then he would have the next shitstorm in the internet. And of course, the customer also wants to live in a nice ecosystem. So there are interdependencies, difficult word. If we are talking about ecosystems, we have to talk about feedstock. Feedstock we use to create bioplastics, it mainly influences the price. The more efficiently you can grow your feedstock, and the more harvest you get from it, the lower the price. But it also might damage ecosystems. If you are farming the feedstock in a non-sustainable way, it might increase or decrease carbon footprint, and the customer has certain feedstocks he likes more or less. If we are talking about a feedstock and what the customer likes as feedstock or what not, then we are talking about origin too, because the origin of feedstock and the origin of the material is important to the customer out of 2 different reasons. First one is he doesn't want to have rainforests burnt down in order to to plant corn, for example, or sugarcane. And the other thing is, coming from Asia, South or North America, the customer sees supply chain risk, and he would prefer in many cases the feedstock and the biopolymers coming from Europe. So, price is king, of course, that's what we all know, but carbon footprint is queen. If you don't achieve a great carbon footprint with a bioplastic, then it's not worth making this bioplastic. Easy as that. Be bio-based. Our customers ask for 100% bio-based materials. They are okay with 80% maybe or 70%, but they really raise their eyebrow when they are hearing 50% bio-based or 30% or stuff like that. They don't want to have a bioplastic where everyone on the internet can say, hey, but it isn't bioplastic, it's just 50% bio and the rest is fossil-based. I know it's different reasons why we can't have 100% bio-based for all of the polymers at the moment, but it should be the goal. And if we are going to 100% bio-based, we should do it responsibly, and the farming should get better than ISCC Plus today certifies. Back to our map. Let's cut it down a little and have a look at technical properties. Technical properties are influenced by the additives that we use, of course, and they are also influencing the price. But if we are increasing the functionality of a plastic by using certain complex and functional additives, then this usually is accepted by the customer. Should be sustainable though, of course, but that's fine. One thing we could influence the price in a beneficial way is fillers. Second generation biomass, for example. Biomass as a filler is a great idea, but it affects recyclability negatively, and this will be a future conflict point to regulation. Regulation is about recycling, and fillers prevent bioplastics from being recycled, so we cannot rely on fillers alone. Polymer production, of course, is important because it affects the carbon footprint by having the efficiency just factored in. And then the key point, of course, are the polymers, because they are influencing the price. They are defining the technical properties, and depending on which polymer and the processes needed to produce it, the carbon footprint is hugely determined by the polymer. They are the most influential part of a bioplastic. And as I mentioned before, most fillers are just a stopgap solution if it comes to applications where composting isn't the best option. So, after having certain touch points with regulation so far, we are now focusing on regulation in the further part of the presentation. Regulation mostly comes from the United Nations. United Nations, they are defining Sustainable Development Goals, and you all saw that nice colorful pictograms. It's the absolutely right thing to do. They are wholesome, they are defining the Sustainable Development Goals for social, for economical and for ecological fields of sustainability, and this is what will influence the world most in the next decades, at least I hope so. One political player that is influenced hugely by the Sustainable Development Goals is the European Commission. The European Commission, they are not only influenced by the Sustainable Development Goals, but also by experts that they are consulting before they are creating new regulation. They are supported by authorities and associations, of course, and maybe the one or the other fossil plastic lobbyists also around the European Commission trying to influence all the regulation. The European Commission does not only get influenced by those parties, they are also creating stuff themselves. The Single-Use Plastics Directive was one of the biggest regulations of the plastics market in the last years. It's the regulation where they forbid the use of, for example, straws from plastic, or plates and cups, single-use plates and cups from plastic. And there will be new regulations that are in that mind, basically. And the most influential thing the European Commission has created in the last years, I would say, is the European Green Deal. And that's the new paradigm under which all of the financial and economical and ecological politics of the European Union will be set up. There is the action plan on sustainable finance. Some might say, hey, that's not interesting for me, I'm just producing plastics. It is interesting, and it's the most influential part of all, I'd say. There is the Circular Economy Action Plan, and there is the European Climate Law. And to have a look of what they are doing and why the action plan on sustainable finance is that important from my perspective on, is this one directs the funding to carbon reducing technologies and business models. If you are working with a technology that does not reduce the carbon footprint, then you won't get funding. This is not only for research funding, this is also for your refinancing. If you want to get some money from the bank, for example, to ensure the liquidity or to finance a new plant, you will only get it if you are complying to ESG. If you are not reducing carbon footprint, you will have higher costs in financing. If you still get money, might also be that you don't get any money for non-carbon reducing activities anymore. The Circular Economy Action Plan is making sustainable products the norm, or aims for this. They want to achieve less waste in Europe, more transparency, and they are also focusing explicitly on plastics. There is a whole huge paragraph on plastics. Basically, it's two topics in there. Topic one is microplastic. They want to prevent microplastics and are aiming towards textiles and tires especially, so it might not be the biggest part for most of the bioplastics manufacturers, but recycling is. And as I mentioned before, if we keep adding second generation biomass to plastics and are basically saying, hey, if I'm adding enough waste, then the carbon footprint is fine and it's nice to compost it, then we won't make it, because circularity also needs recyclability of the material, and that is difficult if you have 30 or 40% organic waste in your plastic. And the European Climate Law, this is the legal foundation for all the laws in this field in the next years. It's reaching out until the time after 2050, so it's more than 30 years from now. It will determine all the legislation. We have minus 55% carbon emissions until 2030, net zero until 2050, and negative carbon after 2050. And negative carbon means that we have to think about bioplastics as a carbon sink. So, as you see, legislation, economy, and finance are closely tied to the Green Deal, and the most important KPI and the most important measurements in there are carbon reduction measurements. And this complies with what companies are going for at the moment. They want carbon reduction. That's the most important thing for them. The Action Plan on Sustainable Finance aims for low carbon benchmarks. So financing any investments is only possible if you are comparatively good to the benchmarks. And of course, the benchmarks will go down over time in order to achieve the net carbon zero emission targets. We have the taxonomy law. This is already active, and this had an extremely huge impact on the capital markets. You can only get capital for new business, for expansion, if they are sustainability according to the European Union. And the European Union is not the biggest fan of bioplastics. They are the biggest fan of carbon reduction and of microplastic free and of recycling. So we need to meet these requirements in order to get future funding and to be able to grow. And then there's duties and disclosures. We all will get obligatory reportings that focus on the key performance indicators for more sustainability, microplastic emissions, carbon emissions, farming, how sustainable the farming is, land use, soil quality, all of those problems that are coming with the feedstock. And this all directs funding, and it directs it to the technology which is best to achieve the targets that we have in the European climate law. In short, if you have fossil carbon, you can't have funding. Doesn't matter if it's the end customer or if it's the raw material producer. If you are using fossil carbon, you won't get funding. Circularity is the second big topic in regulation, in the upcoming regulation. Microplastics, I talked about it a little bit. Compostability might be nice, biodegradability for certain products, but it's more on the textile and tire side, not so much on the technical bioplastics. And the big point here is recyclability, as I said, determined by additives. So if we have some additives that protect the bioplastics from this strong degradation that we see over certain cycles, this could be great, but it has to be a green additive, of course, not just cross-linkers or stuff like that. And the polymers themselves, they are targeted by this most heavily. We need good polymers that are stable over certain recycling cycles. They don't all have to be biodegradable. It's not bad if they are, but recycling will be more important in the future. The use of, and that's quoting the European Commission, the use of bioplastics based on is only good based on assessing where the use of bio-based feedstock results in genuine environmental benefits going beyond reduction in using fossil resources. So bioplastics are then preferred by the European Commissions if they are better than fossil solutions. And there we are not competing with virgin fossil materials that gets burned, or at least not in the long shot. We are competing against recycled fossil materials. And this is the benchmark to beat. And I mean, going back to that, we can beat it at the moment, but only with certain solutions. We need more solutions that can beat fossil. And this is also pretty much what we found out that our customers want. They are asking for a solution that's better than what they are doing now. And for them, most often it's not important if it's bio-based or not. It should be better than what they are doing now. And if it's bio-based, then it really should be bio-based. And I mean, bio-based carbon content helps us beating fossil materials. So keep it bio, as I said before. And the conclusion is customers like the regulation European Union makes because it's also their regulation and it helps them to pursue their goals. To come basically to an end, a bit more detail on those 11 fascinating reasons, and we are now having our countdown. Reason 11. Our customers, their customers, we all want to live in an intact environment, and the regulation that's now on its way is helping with that. Reason 10. Being in line with future regulation makes refinancing cheaper. 9. Our customers can share a part of their responsibility with us and our suppliers. Nobody in the whole supply chain has to do it on their own, but we have to do it together in order to be compliant and in order to have success. Reasonable and profound regulation decreases the risk of wrong decisions due to lack of own knowledge, and that's actually the status quo in most companies. It's not that many companies that have a deep life cycle assessment knowledge and that want or can even invest that much effort into finding the sustainable solutions on the market. If regulation only leaves the good solutions, it helps the customers, it reduces their risk, and that's something they like. 7. Doing the right thing, environmental protection, is no cost disadvantage if all the players in the market are obliged to do it so. So this helps the ones that want to do something for the environment to do it without being more expensive than the competitors. Environmentally friendly products can also be marketed as such, and they can transport a positive image. That is the case for now. In the midterm, I'd say it is obligatory to have sustainability in your products. Then it turns around and it's a negative image that you are creating if you are not sustainable. 5. The well-defined regulation offers planning reliability, and as I showed you, the regulation aims for time frames largely beyond 2050. So it's the planning the planning reliability for the next 30, 40 years that's defined by the regulation now. 4. Early adaptation to coming regulation gives the chance for a competitive advantage. That's the case now. You can be first mover, you can be the first one that has bioplastic in the products, especially in the markets we are in. Now is the chance, but of course this chance closes. 3. With the Green Deal regulations, billions of public funding are available for developing sustainable products. This can be products made out of bioplastics. This can also be the development of new bioplastics. We have a load of startups that are working on new biopolymers, and we love to have them on the market and to buy the polymers from them. 2. The customers face the same regulation as we do, and if they are using the regulated raw materials, it makes it easier for them. And 1, of course, Biobox guides you to the regulation jungle for healthcare, lab and hygiene applications. So if you don't know where to start, just get back to us and we'll get you through. So what do we have to do in order to get these bioplastic pellets up? Basically, the polymer producers, as I said before, you need to have 100% bio-based feedstock in the long run. This should be farmed in an environmentally friendly way and truly sustainable, and we need transparency and efficiency in the industrial production processes. And the customers, or our customers who use the products, then the bioplastics, we have to think about plastic as a system along the whole product life cycle. They should start their transformation to using more sustainable materials now, not in 5 years, because then it's too late. And you should partner up with someone who's regulatory-wise competent. Here for you, my contact details. If you have any questions, if you want to get in touch, just do like you want. So that was it with bioplastics regulation. I hope you had some insights that you might have not had before. If you are looking for bioplastics for regulated products, for the health sector, for medical products, laboratory products, hygiene products, feel free to reach out to us, biobox.systems, or my contact details you've seen before. I had really a lot of fun doing the presentation. If you have questions about it, if you are a supplier with very low carbon footprint or high quality products, also feel free to contact us. I'm happy to get in touch with all of the bioplastics community that is here in virtual Hof, and have a great day. Have fun at the other presentations, and it was really good to have you here. Bye.